future. Tonight we celebrate the 2016 Contemporary Forum Artist Grant winners and the 2016 Arlene and Morton Sculpt Contemporary Forum Artist Awards. I didn't see Mort tonight, but I always like to give a shout out to both Arlene and Mort for their generosity. There you are. Thank you so much. Their exhibition this year is installed in the Anderman and Marley Galleries of Phoenix Art Museum and runs until September 17th. So we're really thrilled about that. Now I'd like everyone to give a round of applause to the 2016 Contemporary Forum Artist Grant winners. They don't have to stand up unless they feel compelled to. In alphabetical order, David Emmett Adams. Christine Casano. Brian David Griffith. Constance McBride. And Mary Meyer. Last but not least, I would like to recognize and introduce our 2016 Arlene and Morton Sculpt Award winner and this evening's lecturer, Patricia Sannit. I'm not done yet, but you can stand here.
I'll just stand
You
here.
can stand here. Patricia Sannit works with repurposed clay and found objects to explore connections within our shared humanity. As a practicing artist and instructor at Phoenix College since 2001 or earlier, maybe. Sannit has used these materials as a basis of a sculptural investigation connecting geologic time, archaeology, and history across cultures. Her exhibition, Rise, Fall, Rise, is a culmination of a year-long series of conversations, some between the artist and her work, some between artist and curator. Questions were posed, positions were taken, objects were made, and arguments were started. I want to thank Patricia, since you're up here. Thank you so much for a really wonderful
Thank you, Gilbert.
year of conversation and planning, and I'm thrilled to finally open the exhibition and have you speak about your work. So welcome, Patricia Sannit.
Hi. You know, I was so ready to talk to you about an hour ago, and you know, it's really different when all of you are in front of me. And I look at this computer, and I do not see my PowerPoint in front of me. I'm sure it's here, and I'm hoping that ID will tell me what to do if I can't find it. But I'm guessing if I click there with the clicker, I will get to it. Technology. My husband in the front row, who is much more technologically gifted than I am, I'm sure was thinking, oh, just do it, just push the button. So this is an example. Thank you. This is an example. I can stand here? Okay, good. I'll stand here. I feel more comfortable. You know, I don't really draw very much. I think a lot, and I write down things that I'm thinking about. And you know, as an artist, I think we all have different ways to make work. And I am someone who thinks a lot. And I grew up in a thinking household, and I live in a thinking household. And so these are the things that I think about a lot. And I wanted to put those up there so you can read them. I'm not going to read them to you. I learned that, like in PowerPoint 101. Don't read the slide. I do have sincere thank yous to give, because this has been a year unlike any really in my life. And first, I have to thank Mort and Arlene. Hello, Mort. What a gift. A gift, a grant like this and an award like this offers an artist like me, first, an amazing museum to have a show, a huge boost, and money to buy materials. And for many of us, that is, it's been an incredible, generous award, and I so appreciate it. And then I had the amazing opportunity to work with Gilbert Vicario, who is a kick-ass curator. And he did possibly kick my ass. And it turns out I really needed it. It's been interesting. I talk a lot, and I think I've talked to so many curators over the years that they stopped talking back to me. And Gilbert held his own in every conversation. And so I really appreciate that. I moved all this work here. It didn't actually. Art Solutions moved all this work to the gallery. I can carry it all. It's true myself because I have muscles, right? But Art Solutions, I'm so grateful to them, and for Contemporary Forum, who helped facilitate that, and of course Contemporary Forum, that does an amazing job supporting art. I am, well, no, I'm elaborating, okay? And then, of course, my family, my supportive husband, my son, my daughter, who are amazing, my father, who is here in the front row, and my dad raised me with art. We spent more weekends at the Cleveland Museum of Art than I can count. And he is a thinker and a mensch and a wonderful man, and I appreciate it. And I have to thank Carly Giese, Kelly Hansen, and Shalu, because they are my studio assistants. And they are Wonder Women, truly. So if you see them, say, you are amazing. They are amazing people. Thank you. Thanks to Bill and Stacy, Ted, the staff here, and everyone who has helped support my catalog. I'm making a catalog. People have been so generous to me. All year long, people have been amazing to me, and thank you. All right, okay, thank you. All right. Now I have to start with the talk. I'm already probably over my 25 minutes, so just cut me off, okay? Gilbert's yeah, I'm cutting her off. Okay, I can tell already. So I think, as I told you a lot, I think about change, I think about chance, I think about the creation of the universe. And in my work, I try to bring everything in it. I am so ridiculously ambitious on some level. I want to touch everybody. I want every aspect of the universe to be in my work. And that's daunting. But that's what I try to do. And so I think about the beginning of the universe because there's something about that amazing beginning that represents, endless possibility. So I threw that slide in there. And then I threw this in because I thought it was this beautiful representation of the diversity of the biological genome, and it turns out those are just the bats, okay? Those are just the bats. It was the prettiest representation I saw, and then I discovered it wasn't the whole universe, which I guess is really a better slide because that tells us how vast the possibilities are, how incredibly vast, which means how strange and amazing it is that we are here as humans. And the human experience is so special. And how did that happen in the face of all that? I am overawed by this constantly. And this is my problem when I'm out in public, because I see all these people that I don't know, and I feel I want to be connected, and I'm not very connected. I live in my head maybe a little bit too much. And I see all these people, with all these lives, and all this potential, and motivation, and desires, and hope, and I want to touch all that. And I can't necessarily, but I try. And can you imagine, though? It's daunting and beautiful that all this exists. Which leads me to the origins of us. So up top, I'm sure you recognize the footsteps at Laetoli. So I thought I would also throw in the footsteps on the moon, because that's it's a nice transition, visual transition. And then I had to throw in Lucy, because 25 almost years ago, I married a paleoanthropologist named Bill Kimball, who's sitting in the front row. And he worked on the Lucy site. He works on the Lucy site. And so Lucy, this amazing Australopithecine afarensis, has been a huge part of my life. And the reason that's important is that that connection to history is part of my daily conversation. And when you see my work, if you've already seen my work, this makes sense, right? So I had to put her there too. And then I put these in because this is my childhood, really. My mom was Swedish American, and I grew up with textiles and weavings and sweaters and dalahesta and all these little things, which are beautiful patterns, gorgeous patterns. And this sense of pattern and appreciation for traditional crafts, for jewelry, for weaving, for art, for ceramics, was a huge part. It was just what I took it for granted, frankly. I didn't even think about it. This is what I lived with. And it turns out that has an impact on people like me. This is my first serious teacher, Warren Mackenzie. I went to art school in Norway. And when I came back from that, I went to the University of Minnesota. And I happened to take a lot of ceramics. Well, I didn't happen to take ceramics. I planned to take ceramics. And Warren Mackenzie, if you don't know, if you know anything about American studio pottery, you know that Warren Mackenzie is the grandfather of it all. He is an American living treasure. He's in his 90s now. He's still making pots. And he was a teacher that we all want to have. And I was incredibly fortunate to work with him. And I was a studio rat, basically. You can probably tell from my work that I'm sort of prolific. Well, you can imagine when I was making pots, I made tons of pots. And it is still actually part of who I am, very deeply. It gave me an incredible familiarity with a material. And I think once you know a material well, intimately, deeply, at length, you have confidence with it. You have an understanding of it. You want to exploit it, and you get pissed off at it. There's a whole range of emotions. I feel like I grew up with clay. I did start taking my first clay class when I was 5. So in many ways I have. And so this material that I work with primarily is very natural to me. And working with Warren was a great experience. However, it turns out I'm not really a potter. And by the end of my undergraduate degree, I majored in art history, which turns out to be one of the best choices I could have made, and Scandinavian studies, and then fine art. So I also took a lot of sculpture and a lot of everything else. But by the time I left my BFA or my BA, I was feeling really frustrated, and not like I was making art, but like I was decorating. So I got very, very lucky, and I did something that changed my life. I went to work at an amazing site called Ein Gazal outside of Amman, Jordan, and it's a pre-pottery Neolithic B site, and it is best known for these remarkable human statues that are about 3 feet tall, made out of plaster wrapped around straw. 10 to 12, the site probably started around 12th century BCE, continued until about the 5th century BCE, and these are arguably the earliest human statues. And I worked at the site. And it was right outside of Amman, and I lucked into a really crazy, great experience. And the reason it changed me is because I was working someplace where I saw a different culture, but a culture that I understood very easily. Because the walls and the buildings and everything were covered with the same patterns that I knew fairly intimately from my Scandinavian background. And I had those epiphanies that I think you probably have in your 20s, that the world is one, but it turns out the world is one, It is. And I will argue that to the day I die. And that's what my art is all about. Really, I could really stop right now, but I'm not going to. Because I found this common language, geometries, to be something that I had within me anyway. All my drawings, all my doodles when I was a kid were little triangles. And so here I saw this covering buildings. This is a citadel outside of Palmyra, which doesn't exist now, by the way. This is Petra, if anyone's been to Petra. These are these incredible tombs that are there. Oh, good, I wrote it down. That's excellent. And then, of course, in Damascus. So working there and traveling pretty extensively through that part of the world changed how I thought about things. I saw patterns with these gorgeous Bedouin things. I have these in my closet still. And this beautiful necklace. The necklace is actually Ethiopian because my husband goes to Ethiopia. He brings me back really good jewelry, which you can probably tell I like. Things like that, right? So these are part of my life. However, the most important thing that happened to me when I was in Jordan is a story that I tell, and I will tell it again, although some of you have probably heard it, but it is my art story. It is my art genesis. The site I worked at, Ein Gazal, is an exceptional site. I was fortunate. The site, when you do archaeology, you divide the area into these, we call them squares. They're broken off by cord. They're about 2 meters. And so this was my square. And we excavated through a couple meters of layers, stratigraphy, right? So you can see different layers, different cultures, different civilizations, like the Grand Canyon. And that was wonderful. But towards the end, at the very end really, there was this plaster floor. That's what you see on the top. The plaster floor was decorated with iron oxide. And iron oxide is something that all ceramic artists know really well. It's what we use all the time. And maybe it was the last couple of days of the field season. I was there. It was extremely hot. It was over 100 degrees. It was very empty for some reason. I don't know why. I think it was because lots of people had gone home already. And I was there sweeping the floor on my knees. And I realized, of course, that, 8,000 years ago, another woman had been sweeping the floor on her knees there. And I suddenly felt like, oh my God, I was linked to history, backwards and forwards. And I had never felt that way before. I was always kind of, existentialist, not really connected. And I just felt like I was part of something. And then I'm sweeping a little bit more, and I pick up an edge of the plaster, and I realize that there's a burial. I talked to my field boss, and we excavate. And so this is the burial that I excavated. And what is not in this picture is the infant that was in there. So you can imagine, I'm sure, if you can't imagine, I'm not telling my story, but you can imagine how much this affected me and how I realized this is my mission, this is my job, right, is to create a common language and to make sure that we all understand that. So I came back from this experience and I went to graduate school, which was really different from working here, but it's what we do, right? I went to work with Viola Fry in California at the California College of Arts. There's a gigantic Viola Fry, not dissimilar to this one. I think he's a naked guy on the mezzanine up there. He's got clothes here. And working with Viola for someone like me was perfect. She works big. I work big. She had 2 warehouses full of art, completely packed, and that's my ambition. She taught me, not very much by speaking, I have to say. She wasn't all that verbal, but she was someone who was an excellent role model. She had just come out off of her show at the Whitney, so she was the first major American ceramist that had a show at the Whitney, so I was, that's where I want to go, right? And so she was a wonderful teacher. She really was. And I think that we all have many teachers. As I said, I have a degree in art history as well, and so my conversations in my head while I'm working, as much as they are about history and art and material, they are also with every single artist that I know and love, living and dead. And so I'm showing some images now of artists whose work I love, and also pots, because I always make pots. I come back to pots all the time. Noguchi and Martha Graham. This has been on the wall of my studio for as long as I can remember. This symbiosis, this creative energy between the 2 of them was just spectacular as far as I'm concerned. Heart-wrenchingly beautiful, and I yearn for that. Carl Andre and his amazing minimalism. You wouldn't think that when you look at me, but something about it. And then Louise Nevelson, Eduardo Chilada, I love his work. And then, of course, I go to Davis Salvage and find all sorts of scrap, and that's scrap from Davis. the movement and marks I find in nature, and in detritus are as important to me as anything else. Martha Graham again, couldn't resist. And Brancusi. Nature, you can read anyway, but you can see maybe why these things are so important to me. Arlene, check it. I saw the Frank Stella show in New York last year, and I was just completely, it's amazing. So now I'm going to show you some of my work, okay? And I'm going to begin with graduate student work, but we're going to fly through that, so don't worry. I see that I don't know how long I've spoken now. It might be 16 minutes. That's not terrible. So this was my thesis show. These are really big. One of them is in my backyard still. And you can see, though, how I was trying to channel and very affected by the sense of the human experience through time and what kind of, and this vulnerability of what it means to be human. Because I think if we're human, the thing is we have massive ambition and huge desires, but then it turns out we have these very corporeal bodies that get weak and they, die. And so that balance between our desires and our ambition and our vulnerability is a deep part of what I do. I think that's in Sarah Lieberman's house, I think. And I make pots. I always make pots. I make pots all the time. And I think I make pots to keep me sane, actually, because making sculpture for me is so hard. It takes everything out of me. I'm a wreck. But making pots for me is really fun, and it's a huge pleasure, and it's lovely. And so I kind of try to balance. And sometimes I felt very schizophrenic about it, and there's sometimes people have said, if you focus on one body of work, you'd be far more successful. But it turns out I'm the person that I am, and I make pots, and I make sculpture, and that's just the way it is. And they're beautiful pots. Sometimes I try to make sculptural pots, or vessels that are sculpture. So you can see these. And then I got ambitious. It may have coincided with I have 2 children, with my daughter getting into school, so I had a little more time in the studio. I got a really, really terrific grant from the Arts Commission, and I told them I wanted to build a really big project called the Citadel. A number of years ago, I had seen this image in the New York Times. It's a bird's eye view of the Citadel in Erbil in northern Iraq, or in the Kurdish region of Iraq, long before any of us were talking about Iraq, right? No one talked about Erbil. No one heard news reports from Erbil. I just thought this was an amazing image. And it's a UNESCO heritage site. It's incredibly significant. It's been inhabited. It is the longest, most continuously inhabited city in the world. It was built, 7,000, started 7,000 before the Common Era. People still live there in the middle of that. So here's all of Erbil surrounding it, and inside is these people living very similar, actually quite modest lives within this. The outside wall is about 30 meters high, and there is sort of parapets and buildings on the top, and it's beautiful. And all I could think about was what was in that 30 meters that was hidden. What's hidden? How much life and sweat and expectations and love and babies being born and jobs, and how much is lost in all that? And so that was a story that I wanted to tell. So I had a beautiful exhibition at the Arizona State Art Museum Ceramic Research Center, and Peter Held was the curator there, and now Garth Johnson is the curator there. And I worked on it for a very long time with people. This was the first community-based project that I did. I invited many, many, many people to come to my home and my studio and work on this with me, because this piece represents the passage of time and the contributions of many people. So I started in the beginning, And then I made layer after layer after layer. My volunteers made the blocks. I did the carving for the most part. And every layer is carved and then covered over, never to be seen again. Because this is important, right? How much history is lost? It's that what gives us our soul. And so this piece has a lot of lost history. And it was, it's one of my favorite things I've ever done. After I finished that, I really couldn't work anything quite that large again for a little while. But I continued to work on modular pieces. And, I should go back for a second just to hear, because I got tired of working with human history, and I started being fed up with humans, frankly. It was an election season. and all I could think about was, the fighting, and these it seemed like hormonal impulses that were making people just act so horribly. And so I thought, sort of thinking a lot more, less about human history and a lot more about the history of the planet and the universe again. And so I started making a series of pieces that sort of addressed my interest in the bigger picture. Human history was way too short. Today, supposedly in Morocco, it's going back to 300,000 years for Homo sapien, sapien. Arguable, apparently. I heard the program on NPR on the way over here. And this one, this is like my strangled series, because I didn't understand at the time, but I'm guessing when I was really, really frustrated with making pots, so I started strangling them, That's so obvious. I didn't get it. But, so these pieces were much more about mixed media. And the thing is, I started realizing, why am I just using clay? What is wrong with me? What about every other sculpture material out there? What about, I had read a lot of Joseph Albers in the Black Mountain College, and he has this beautiful statement about the non-hierarchical use of materials, and I was like, well, I can be as non-hierarchical as anybody. And I started getting material everywhere I could and using it, and thinking, I didn't want to be precious about clay. I didn't want to be precious about the material. There's something in my discipline that sometimes we're very purists, and I'm really not a purist, and I didn't want my work to be part of that. But then here I go again. I got a grant. That's right, I did get a grant. And I did this, I invited, once again, tons of people to my studio to do this community-based project once again. It turns out I really love working with people in this community. So people came to my studio. They made hundreds of these pieces with me. What happens is people usually make the objects, and then we sit there and carve together, and it's interesting. Conversations happen. You hear life stories. It's a nice thing. It's a beautiful thing. And then I create these installations with all these site-specific installations using all these pieces. So I recreated this in various places, in various sort of iterations. That's a pretty shot, isn't it? And then I got a really fabulous grant from the city of Mesa to do this so this one, I made it 1,000 of those pieces. And then we had about 500 wood pieces to go with it. So I created this installation at the Mesa Art Center, and then I invited people to come participate in it, because I was thinking so much about migration. Migration is huge for me, this idea that people bring culture with them, and they impact us and influence us. And so I invited people to come and draw on the pieces that I provided for them, and then add them to my sculptures, and then take ones from like this end and bring it to that end, because I wanted them to build their own cities. And this was pretty fun. It was a good project. And that was at the, well, you can see that. Oh yeah, I make pots. I do. I make pots. I really love making pots. This was last year, I believe. Bill Likens at Gebert Contemporary and Stacy Barr at Gebert Contemporary allowed me to do this project in their beautiful gallery. And I put wet clay on the floor and invited people to walk on it. And then I used all of my pieces in the middle, and then I made these substantial totems to ring the outside. And they're sort of butt stratigraphy too. You see the layers, the hidden layers. And then on the back wall, the lovely Marcuse helped me project images of pattern and cities that were falling apart and cities that were growing and roads, the images that I thought were interesting. And this was, it was nice. It was lovely. It was having people walk in that wet clay. People tell me how much they liked it. It was a good experience. Gilbert would not let me do wet clay in the gallery here. Their floors here. They're very nice. This is concrete. I did put plastic down. And then right after that show, Chris Jagman and I did this lovely show at the Mesa Museum of Contemporary Art, and that was a collaboration that we worked on. And that takes me to this show here. So I'm going to just talk a little bit. I don't want to wear you out because I've been to plenty of really long artist talk. You know, it turns out once you're up here, you do want to keep on talking. I'm so sorry. You know, stop. So this show that's out there, some of you have seen it already. You know, I'm calling it Rise, Fall, Rise. And it came out of me, well, it came out of my work, obviously. But I got the wonderful grant and the award from Morton Arlene and Contemporary Forum. And, you know, something like that, it's, you know, it's a big space. Gilbert said, this is your space, and I can fill the space. And I listened to the news a lot, and I was, because I had been to Syria, and I was, like all of us, devastated by the loss of life, primarily, and then the loss of cultural history. And so I'm sure you know about the great citadel in Aleppo, which is now not completely destroyed, but it's in ruins. And as is Palmyra, as are these places. And I felt horror, like we all did. And I remembered, though, that the citadel has been around for, you know, if you count the people who lived there in the very beginning, you know, 12,000 years. The citadel itself, 7,000. And it's been destroyed 5 times already. And then rebuilt. And that gave me comfort. The fact that things are destroyed and then we rebuild them. And when you look at the devastation in Syria and Aleppo, and you see the mangled buildings and the rebar, but then you see someone's like, there's a kid playing ball, there's people who are rebuilding their lives. And that is amazing to me. And I know that all of us continue. And I wanted the work out there to speak to that, to our ability to continue with beauty and with grace, and maybe a little bit of, well, more than a little bit of sorrow. But, you know, it's my art, it's my work, this is what I do. I think about our lives. I try to make work that's meaningful. And this show, to me, I think is, you know, this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to speak to this idea that we mess up, we destroy things, and then we continue. I looked at maps, lots of maps of places, and then I tried to figure out a way to structure the show. I decided to make, basically, a head-like form every week, maybe 2 a week, and they would represent a point in time. So most of the heads represent both a really horrific thing that may have happened in history or contemporaneously, and also a beautiful thing that happened. So most of the heads, if you look at them closely, there'll be like, you know, some little marks on them, and that's my notes to myself of what it refers to. Some of them are really abstracted, like maybe based on some like the map, an abstraction of a map of where something happened. Others are completely abstraction because they're really my own personal weather for the week, how I felt. So that's this was how I thought I would proceed. So there's, I don't want to say a journal, because a journal means daily, right? But, a weekly sort of record of my world. I wanted each one to represent like destruction and recreation. So I tried lots of things. I melted clay in places. This is the bucket over there. But I collected stuff all over the place. I collected things that had been destroyed, and they're all over my studio. And these all became part of my visual lexicon that I tried to bring into my work. And then I made blocks. I made blocks on a monthly basis. And so, when you think about buildings made out of blocks, I thought I was making blocks that I could rebuild a city with. And I made the blocks, I dried them outside. So the heads are sort of like our human history. The blocks are a little bit more natural history, because I make them once a month or so, and then it takes a long time to dry in the winter, not so long in the summer. And so these blocks, they're unfired, they're outside right now, and they will, over the course of the exhibition, fall back into disarray. I find that to be an interesting idea to pursue, and also this sort of a longer timeline than the timeline of human history. It's me working. I work a lot. And this was my studio right before I moved it all over here. So you couldn't really walk in there. It was pretty daunting. I also wanted to do some work that you see represented in the wall panels out there that was out of my clay language and spoke really to time. And so these are mostly plaster and wax on wood, and I let the material do what it wants to do. I let clay do what it wants to do for the most part too. I'm not a control freak about it. And the plaster, I just poured it on there and just kind of let it be. And so this to me is also an interesting idea and sort of beautiful. It's beautiful. And felt very good to create something beautiful. And look that's what's out there. And we do walk in circles as humans. We walk around, we try to create, and I was going to look at my notes the entire time. I didn't look at my notes. Now I'm looking at my notes. I shouldn't look at them. I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you for listening to me. And please, Oh, there's my dog. Hi, Finn. Thank you very much.